The rain was gentle that evening, falling in soft threads that made the city streets shimmer under the streetlights. Eleanor hurried along the narrow pavements, holding a small umbrella that barely kept her from getting wet. She had spent the day in a meeting that drained her energy. All she wanted now was a cup of coffee and a quiet place to think. The cozy cafe at the corner of Maple Street had always been her refuge on rainy days. Its warm lights and familiar aroma of roasted coffee beans welcomed her like an old friend as she pushed the door open. A soft bell announced her arrival. The cafe was quiet, almost empty, except for a man sitting near the window. He was sketching something in a worn notebook, his brows slightly furrowed, lips pressed in concentration. There was something in the way he moved his pen that caught her attention, a carefulness, a thoughtfulness that made him seem almost out of place in the bustling city around him. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to approach him or just find a seat elsewhere. But the seat opposite him was empty, and something about his presence felt inviting rather than distant. She took a deep breath and walked over. "Is this seat taken?" she asked softly. The man looked up, startled for a moment, before giving a small, polite shake of his head. "No, it's free," he replied. His voice was calm, almost hesitant, as if he was careful with every word he spoke. Eleanor smiled and sat down. She opened her bag and pulled out a notebook of her own, pretending to work, though in truth she couldn't keep her eyes off him. There was a quiet intensity about him, a kind of silent story written across his face. He noticed her glance and gave a polite nod, a small smile touching the corner of his lips. After a few moments of comfortable silence, Eleanor decided to break the ice. "I couldn't help noticing your sketches," she said. "You seem really focused." The man looked at her for a long moment before responding. "I guess I am," he said finally. Then, after a pause, he added, almost reluctantly, "I'm Daniel." "Eleanor," she said, extending her hand with a warm smile. He shook it, his grip firm, but not overpowering. There was a pause, a quiet moment of mutual observation. "You come here often?" she asked, trying to make the conversation flow naturally. Daniel shrugged slightly. "Sometimes. I like the quiet. Helps me think." Eleanor nodded. She understood that feeling very well. "It's one of my favorite places too," she said, "especially on rainy evenings like this." For a while they spoke about light things, the weather, the cafe, the small crowd that had started to gather. But Eleanor sensed a depth beneath his calm exterior. Something restrained him, something he was careful not to reveal. Finally, after a long pause, Daniel looked at her and said something unexpected. "I should warn you, I'm not the right man for you." His words were quiet but firm, like a gentle warning flag. Eleanor blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected such honesty so early, and yet she didn't feel hurt or disappointed. Instead, she felt a strange curiosity. "And why is that?" she asked softly, her eyes meeting his. He sighed, a sound of someone carrying a weight too heavy to show easily. "I've made mistakes. I've hurt people before. I'm cautious now. I don't want to cause anyone pain." Eleanor studied him carefully. There was sincerity in his words, but also a vulnerability he couldn't hide. Most people would have walked away at that point, or nodded politely and left. But Eleanor felt a spark of something unusual, something rare. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Let me decide," she said simply. Daniel looked at her in surprise. He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it, as if realizing that no argument could change her mind. There was a quiet strength in her words, a confidence that came not from arrogance but from a deep understanding of human hearts. They returned to conversation, slower now, more deliberate. Eleanor shared small stories of her life, her work, and her love for simple joys. Daniel listened quietly, sometimes offering a comment, sometimes just nodding. The rain outside continued to fall, but inside the cafe, there was a warm cocoon of shared presence. Hours passed unnoticed. At one point, Eleanor looked out the window and realized the streets had begun to empty. The rain slowing to a gentle drizzle. Daniel finally closed his notebook, a faint smile appearing on his lips. "You're persistent," he said softly, okay, almost like a compliment wrapped in a caution. "And you're honest," Eleanor replied. "I respect that more than anything." They walked together to the corner where the taxi stands were. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant flowers. Neither of them wanted the evening to end. But both understood that life would pull them back to reality soon. At the taxi stand, Daniel hesitated. Then, with a quiet voice, he said, "I meant what I said earlier. You should be careful." "I'm not easy to be with." Eleanor smiled, a small, confident smile that held no fear. "No. But I want to try," she said. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to read her soul in that moment. Then he nodded slowly, an unspoken agreement forming between them. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he had underestimated the power of someone willing to choose despite warnings. When the taxi arrived, Eleanor stepped in first, turning to wave at him. Daniel waved back, a faint smile still lingering on his lips. It was the beginning of something uncertain, fragile, but real, a connection neither of them could ignore. That night, as Eleanor lay in bed thinking about the evening, she realized that sometimes the most important decisions were not about logic or caution, but about courage. She had chosen to trust her instincts, to look beyond the warnings, and to see the man as he could be, not just as he feared he was. Daniel, meanwhile, walked back to his small apartment under the quiet glow of streetlights. He felt something unfamiliar stirring inside, a sense of anticipation mixed with apprehension. He had warned her, as he always did, yet she had chosen anyway. Perhaps, he thought, that was the kind of bravery that could change a cautious heart. And in that quiet, rainy night, two people began a story that neither fully understood yet, but both felt would be worth exploring. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a quiet sense of excitement. The memory of her evening with Daniel lingered in her mind like a soft melody. She replayed his words in her head, the warning, the honesty, the way he had looked at her. Yet the one thing that stayed strongest was her own response. "Let me decide." It felt like a small victory. Not against him, but against the fear of hesitation that sometimes held her back in life. Daniel, on the other hand, had woken to a restless mind. He had expected the night to end with silence, with Eleanor moving on as others usually did when faced with his caution. But she hadn't moved on. Instead, she had chosen him. And that choice, simple as it seemed, made him feel exposed in a way he wasn't used to. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him without fear or judgment, someone who had seen past the walls he had built so carefully. For the next few days, their conversations continued, though carefully. Daniel was cautious, unsure of how much to reveal about himself. He had learned over the years that life had a way of testing honesty, of punishing openness with disappointment. Eleanor, however, approached him differently. She asked questions, not to pry, but to understand. She listened without judgment and responded with warmth. One evening, they decided to meet at a small park near the river. The autumn leaves painted the ground in shades of gold and red, and the air carried a crispness that made every breath feel alive. Eleanor arrived first, her scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, hands buried in her coat pockets. She found a bench near the water and waited, watching the gentle ripples as they reflected the fading sunlight. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, carrying his sketchbook. He hesitated when he saw her, as if unsure whether he should sit down or walk past. Eleanor smiled at him gently, and he slowly made his way toward her. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the wind rustling the leaves and the distant laughter of children playing near the swings. Eleanor broke the silence first. "Do you come here often?" she asked, trying to make him comfortable. Daniel shook his head slightly. "Not really. I like quiet places, but I don't often go out. It feels safer inside sometimes." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "I get that. But sometimes, stepping outside, even a little, helps more than staying inside." He looked at her, surprised by her insight. She didn't lecture him or judge him. She simply stated a truth that felt gentle but firm. That was what drew him to her, the way she seemed to see people as they were. Without trying to change them immediately, they walked slowly along the riverbank, talking about small things, books they had read, movies they liked, and favorite childhood memories. But as the conversation deepened, Daniel began to reveal more about himself, though cautiously. "I've been hurt before," he said finally, his gaze fixed on the water. "People I trusted. They left, or they changed. It's hard to open up again after that." Eleanor listened quietly. She didn't interrupt or offer easy solutions. She simply nodded, acknowledging his words. "I know," she said softly. "It's not easy, but you don't have to face everything alone. And sometimes people who stay are the ones worth the risk." Daniel looked at her, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. He wanted to push back, to say that she didn't understand, that his past was too heavy for anyone to carry. But something in her eyes, the steady calm, the quiet determination, made him pause. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, someone could choose to stay. The following weeks were a mixture of joy and challenge. Daniel was naturally reserved, and Eleanor's patience was tested at times. There were moments when he would withdraw suddenly, returning to silence without explanation. He would cancel plans at the last minute or hesitate to share his thoughts. Each time, Eleanor felt the sting of uncertainty. But she reminded herself that love was not about instant certainty. One evening, after a day spent walking through the city, they sat in a small cafe overlooking the river. Daniel had been quiet for most of the day, and Eleanor finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why do you pull away sometimes?" she asked gently. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of hurting you, afraid of being hurt again. It's easier to keep a distance than to risk being close." Eleanor reached across the table, her hand brushing against his. "I understand. But I can't live my life waiting for you to be perfect or fearless. I want to be with you even if it's hard." His eyes met hers, and in that moment, something shifted. He realized that her willingness to stay, to wait, to trust, was unlike anything he had experienced before. He had always thought love was about avoiding pain, but perhaps it was about sharing it and facing it together. As autumn turned to winter, their bond grew stronger, though not without struggles. Daniel's fears sometimes caused tension, and Eleanor had to navigate moments of doubt. But through every challenge, there was also growth, a laughter shared in the park, a warm conversation over coffee, or a quiet moment of understanding during a snowfall. One snowy evening, they found themselves walking through the city streets, the snowflakes falling gently around them. Daniel had been unusually quiet. Eleanor sensed that something was weighing on his mind. Finally, he stopped and turned to her. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious. Eleanor looked at him, concern flashing in her eyes. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've never been this close to anyone in a long time, and I'm scared that I'll mess it up, that I'll hurt you somehow." Eleanor smiled softly, reaching for his hand. "We're not perfect. No one is. But we can choose each other every day, even when it's hard. That's what matters." Daniel's eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. "You're stronger than I thought?" "Oh, and you're braver than you realize," Eleanor replied. "We're learning together." That night, they walked home under the glow of streetlights, their hands intertwined. The snow continued to fall, covering the city in a soft blanket of white. It was quiet, peaceful, and yet full of unspoken promises. They knew that challenges lay ahead, but they also knew that they wanted to face them together. The weeks that followed were a mix of small adventures and quiet moments. They visited art galleries, attended local concerts, and spent evenings cooking simple meals together. Each experience brought them closer, building trust and understanding. Eleanor's patience and Daniel's cautious openness created a delicate balance or rhythm. It was fragile but beautiful. One evening, Daniel invited Eleanor to his apartment. It was a small, cozy space filled with sketches, books, and mementos from his travels. As they sat together sipping tea, he finally shared a part of his past he had never told anyone. "I lost someone once," he said quietly, his eyes distant. someone I loved deeply, and I blamed myself. I still do, sometimes. Eleanor listened, her heart aching for him, but she didn't try to fix his pain. She simply held his hand, offering comfort without words. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly. "You don't have to carry it by yourself." Daniel looked at her, the weight in his chest lightening slightly. He realized that Eleanor's choice to stay, to trust him despite his warnings, was not just an act of courage, it was a gift. And slowly he began to understand that love wasn't about avoiding hurt, but about being willing to be seen, flaws and all. By the time winter reached its peak, their relationship had grown into something deeper than either had expected. It was not perfect, and it was not without fear, but it was real. They had faced challenges, doubts, and moments of hesitation, and yet they had chosen to keep moving forward together, and in that choice, both Eleanor and Daniel discovered something unexpected: the quiet strength of trust, the power of patience, and the beauty of allowing someone to decide for themselves. Even when warnings had been given, the struggle was not over, and neither of them pretended it was. But for the first time, Daniel felt that perhaps he could be the man Eleanor had chosen, a man willing to face fear, to grow, and to embrace love fully, even if it was uncertain. And Eleanor in turn realized that sometimes the heart sees truths that the mind hesitates to accept. She had chosen, again and again, to trust in what she felt rather than what she feared. And in doing so, she had discovered that love, though challenging, could be worth every risk. The winter that year was long and quiet, with soft snow covering the city streets in a peaceful white blanket. Eleanor and Daniel had grown closer over the past months, but neither had forgotten the struggles that had marked the beginning of their connection. Daniel still carried his fears, though they were softened by Eleanor's patience and understanding. And Eleanor had learned that love required courage, not just to choose someone, but to keep choosing them every day, even when challenges arose. It was a Saturday afternoon when Daniel suggested a walk outside. The sun was low, casting a golden glow over the snow, and the streets glistened like tiny diamonds. Eleanor wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck and pulled her coat closer. "Where are we going?" she asked, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "You'll see," Daniel replied, a small, mysterious smile on his face. They walked through the city, the crunch of snow under their boots echoing softly. Daniel led Eleanor to a hill that overlooked the city, a place she had never noticed before. At the top, the view was breathtaking, the rooftops and streets bathed in the soft light of the afternoon sun, the river reflecting the sky like a long, winding ribbon of silver. Eleanor gasped softly. "This is beautiful," she said, turning to look at him. Daniel's expression was serious now, but his eyes held a softness that made Eleanor's heart beat a little faster. "I wanted to show you this place because it feels like a beginning," he said. Eleanor tilted her head, sensing the weight behind his words. "A beginning?" she asked gently. "Yes," he said, taking a deep breath. "I've spent so long being afraid of hurting people, afraid of being hurt, afraid of letting anyone in. But you've changed something in me. You've made me want to face those fears, to try, even though it's hard." Eleanor's heart swelled. She had hoped for these words, but hearing them spoken aloud was different, more real, more powerful. She stepped closer, feeling the warmth of him despite the cold air. Daniel continued, his voice steady but quiet. "I told you once that I wasn't the right man for you. I meant it at the time. I was broken in ways I didn't know how to fix, but I've realized that maybe it's not about being perfect or having everything figured out. Maybe it's about choosing someone even when you're not perfect, even when you're afraid." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. She remembered that first night in the cafe, when he had warned her and she had replied, "Let me decide." And now, after months of struggle, laughter, and small victories, the meaning of her words had grown deeper than she could have imagined. "I chose you," she said softly, her voice steady. "I chose you then, and I choose you now." Daniel looked down at her, his eyes glistening. He reached out, taking her hands in his. "And I choose you, Eleanor," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I may still be afraid sometimes. I may still struggle with my past. But I want to be with you, and I want to truly try to be the man you've chosen." For a moment, they stood together on that hill, holding hands and letting the city lights sparkle below them. The silence was not empty. It was filled with understanding, trust, and a quiet promise that neither fully spoke aloud, but both felt deeply as the sun dipped lower. They walked back down the hill slowly, their steps synchronized, as if moving together through life itself. The streets were almost empty now, and the cold air carried the faint scent of winter flowers from nearby gardens. Each step felt lighter, each breath shared between them a reminder of the journey they had taken together. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened in ways that were both visible and subtle. They continued their routines: coffee in the mornings, walks in the evenings, but now there was an unspoken understanding, a quiet confidence in each other's presence. Daniel no longer withdrew as often, and Eleanor felt the comfort of knowing that their connection was growing stronger every day. One afternoon, Daniel invited Eleanor to a small art gallery opening. He had been hesitant at first, unsure if she would enjoy it, but Eleanor loved the idea. As they walked through the gallery, Daniel pointed out a few sketches he had done recently, his pride hidden behind his usual modesty. "These are beautiful," Eleanor said, genuinely impressed. "You've captured so much emotion in them." Daniel smiled faintly, a little embarrassed by the praise. "Thank you. It's easier to express myself here than with words sometimes." Eleanor nodded, understanding completely. "And yet, your words today on the hill were the most powerful thing you've said. They mattered more than any sketch." Daniel looked at her, the hint of a blush coloring his cheeks. "I just wanted you to know the truth," he said softly. "I wanted you to see me, not just the idea of me." "I do," Eleanor said. "I see you. All of you. And I accept it. All of it." That night, as they walked home, snow began to fall again, coating the streets in a soft, quiet blanket. Eleanor laughed softly as a few flakes landed on her hair. Daniel watched her, the warmth in his heart growing stronger. He realized that the small, simple moments, walks, laughter, quiet talks, were what truly mattered. Love was not grand gestures alone. It was consistency, patience, and choosing each other every day. As winter gave way to early spring, their relationship continued to flourish. They spent afternoons reading together, cooking meals, and planning small trips to nearby towns. Each experience, no matter how ordinary, strengthened the trust between them. They had learned to navigate disagreements with respect, to communicate fears without blame, and to celebrate joys without hesitation. One evening, Eleanor invited Daniel to her apartment for a simple dinner. The table was modest, with a few candles creating a warm glow. They ate slowly, savoring the food, but more importantly, savoring each other's company. After dinner, they moved to the small balcony, looking out at the city lights. Eleanor leaned against the railing, feeling the warmth of Daniel's hand on her shoulder. "I never thought I could feel this way," Daniel said quietly. "I never imagined someone would choose me, fully, with all my flaws. And now, I can't imagine not having you in my life." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes filled with love. "And I can't imagine my life without you either. You've taught me patience, understanding, and the importance of trust. But more than that, you've shown me that love is not just about being safe, it's about being brave together." Daniel smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I want to be brave," he said. "Brave with you, for you, with us." Eleanor's heart swelled. She knew that the journey ahead would not always be easy, but for the first time, she felt a deep confidence in their connection. They had faced fears, doubts, and struggles, and yet they had chosen each other. Time and again, the turning point came one spring afternoon as they walked along the riverbank. Daniel stopped suddenly and turned to Eleanor. His expression was serious, but his eyes held the warmth she had come to love. "Eleanor," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I know I've warned you before. I've told you I wasn't the right man. But I want to make a promise now. A promise that I will try every day to be the man you deserve. To face my fears, to grow, and to love you fully. Will you continue to choose me? Eleanor smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. I do, she said softly, her voice steady. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. Daniel's face lit up with a joy that was almost childlike. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close as if to anchor himself in the reality of her words. And in that moment, the struggles of the past months, the fears, the doubts, the walls they had both faced felt distant, replaced by a quiet certainty that they had chosen each other fully. From that day on, their lives moved forward together with a renewed sense of purpose and love. They continued to face challenges. Of course, life never offers a path without obstacles, but now they faced them as a team. The strength of their connection, built on trust, patience, and courage, became their foundation. Eleanor often thought back to that first night in the cafe. When Daniel had warned her that he wasn't the right man, she smiled at the memory, grateful for her own courage and intuition. That night had been the beginning not of an instant love, but of a journey that required choices, patience, and unwavering trust. And Daniel, too, remembered the words she had spoken, "Let me decide." Those words had been a turning point in his life, showing him that love was not about avoiding pain or hiding fears. It was about allowing someone to see you, to choose you, to stand by you, even when life was uncertain. Together, they had discovered the true meaning of connection. It was not in perfection or in flawless moments, but in the willingness to choose, to trust, and to grow with each other. And in that choice, they found a love that was enduring, real, and deeply fulfilling, a love that neither fear nor doubt could break. As spring fully arrived, the city was alive with color and life. Eleanor and Daniel walked through blooming gardens, their hands intertwined, hearts synchronized. They spoke of dreams, shared laughter, and sometimes simply enjoyed the quiet comfort of being together. It was a love grounded in reality, strengthened by struggle, and celebrated in joy and in every glance, every word, every gentle touch. They were reminded of the journey that had brought them Hera, journey of courage, patience, and the simple, profound act of choosing each other. For Eleanor and Daniel, the warning had been real. The struggle had been hard. But the decision, the choice to trust and love had